So now let's talk a little bit about Photoshop's layout and my setup there, but please note that this is going to be a condensed version since I don't use Photoshop as much in my digital painting process and I don't want to overwhelm you with information. So I'm just going to show you the pieces that I use the most. So I've just opened Photoshop CC and these are some of my recent files. Let's start with Create New. So here you can open up some of Photoshop's presets. And they have some examples here. Those are all pretty self-explanatory. We can also make our own. Similar to Procreate, there's options for you to set things up as pixels, inches, centimeters, millimeters. What's a lot more powerful or flexible than Procreate is that it's not set in stone. So you can set it up however you want. I would say make sure your resolution is correct. So if you want to make a print, make sure you're painting at 300 dpi, and that's just how many pixels per inch there are. If it's just for web, you can push it down to 72, which is the common resolution number. You don't want your file sizes to get too big. But I would say, if you're not sure, err on the side of higher resolution, and you can always save it out at a web-friendly size later on. So I have it set up at 8 by 10 inches. Background contents are white. My color profile is working RGB. So it's an sRGB that I like because it can be adaptable to CMYK, which is the color profile for print, or RGB, which is the color profile that is best suited for digital. So now we can create that, and you'll see that you have a blank canvas here. So for a beginner, I would say that Photoshop can seem really intimidating. There's so many tools, so many functions, so many windows. When you open it for the first time, yours is going to look a little bit different because I've customized my workspace. So I'm just going to walk through the parts that I think are most important to a beginner and then explain a little bit on why I have my workspace set up this way. With Photoshop, there's many ways to do the same thing. So as you probably know, if you're familiar with any sort of processing program, you have a file, you can go to Save As, or they have the shortcuts provided here. You can hit Shift, Command S, and do the same thing. There's so many instances of that in Photoshop that I think the best way is actually just to take the time to learn the keyboard shortcuts. If you're planning to get serious with Photoshop, I found that saved so much time, and it was pretty fun in a way. It's almost like learning the piano because now I do almost everything through the keyboard. What's cool is that if you hover over it with your mouse, Photoshop will show you what the shortcut is. So this is V. And I'll create a link in the tutorial that sends you to all the shortcuts. I would print it out and then have it at your desk and learn it. And eventually you will memorize it like I have now, and it'll become second nature to you and it'll speed up your workflow so much. Everything else here you'll learn as you go, but if you just hover over it, it'll explain what it is and how to use it. And they even have these handy little videos that they did not have when I was first learning how to use these that are actually quite helpful. So this is, obviously a selection tool. And one thing you might not know is that if you right click on these, if they have this tiny little arrow in the corner, that means there's more functions hidden inside that you can pick. So when I right click on this, this is a lasso selection tool. So you can select an organic shape, or you can select something that's more magnetic or a polygonal lasso tool. So I would just hover over these, you can learn everything, but I tend to use obviously the move tool the most. You right click it, I don't know why, but they put the artboard tool in here as well. I feel like that should just be separate and on its own. And I use the lasso tool a lot to select, and that's the shortcut key L. I use the eyedropper tool a ton, and the brush, and the eraser tool. For graphic design, I might use a text tool, but in this class I'm not going to cover that, just digital painting. Just know that these things are there. Crop tool, if you plan on cropping your canvas, but there's other ways to do that, which I will show you later in this class. Let's focus on the brush tool and the eraser tool for now. With the tools out of the way, let's talk about these windows. So all of these windows are customizable in so many ways, but you can go up here and whatever's checkmarked is what will show. As a digital artist, I would say that the windows that you'll most likely have open is for sure brushes, the color picker. I find libraries actually to be very helpful in Photoshop. So basically, In Creative Cloud, you can create a library and it syncs across all of Adobe's programs so that when I open this libraries panel in Illustrator, my scene color palettes and little graphics are saved there as well. History panel is going to be useful, especially as a beginner if you want to go back in history, but of course you always Command Z for undo. Another panel that I tend to have open is Actions. And I'll show you how to create one of those. Basically allows you to set up shortcuts. So I tend to do flip horizontal often. And all you have to do, actually, let me just show you now, to create that, is when you're not in button mode, you can create new. And I'll just set one up called flip vertical. And then I like to assign a color and hit record. So this little red dot is going to be on. And now anything that you do, Adobe is going to record and turn it into an action. If I go to image rotation, flip canvas vertical, that will flip the document. If I want to flip just the layer and not the whole document, I will go to edit, transform, flip vertical, and now just that layer has flipped. So I'm going to stop that. Now go to button mode. Now I have this new button action, and whenever I tap it, I can flip vertical much more easily than going through all of that menu selection. So the ones that I have set up are flip horizontal. I actually don't use flip vertical very often. Content aware is something that's more for photo editing and something that I don't use very often, digital painting, so we'll skip that. And add noise. I actually think adding noise is something that I like to use pretty often, so to demonstrate a little bit more, you'll find that these are very smooth, solid colors. And sometimes at the end of a finished piece, if I want just a little bit more texture, I can add noise. And the way that you would normally do that is you go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, pick your pixels, hit OK. But by recording a command, I can just hit Add Noise. And finally, I have the Layers panel open, where just like in Procreate, you can better manage your drawing by having different pieces of your drawing on different layers. That's kind of the fundamentals of the pieces that I use in Photoshop. You'll find that Procreate actually just takes all the things you really need in Photoshop and puts it into a very streamlined and well-organized app. But there's still going to be things that I can't do in Procreate that I need to do in Photoshop, and I'll explain more of that later when we get to the exporting of the example. For now, I think that this is all you really need to know in terms of the basic setup of Photoshop, and let's go into the next class.